They all stood together laughing. Until your family members exposed what you truly are. The night carried an unusual stillness, a kind of silence that sank into the rooms and corners of every memory you ever kept hidden, and before anyone even realized it, the laughter rose like smoke from a place you once believed was safe. They stood together in a half-circle, their grins stretched wider than comfort allowed, pretending innocence as though their whispers had not already rehearsed the moment to come. Every breath you took trembled with the weight of something approaching, something old, something long buried yet suddenly awake in the atmosphere around you. The floor beneath your feet felt thinner than paper, as though truth itself could rip straight through it, and while the sound of their shared amusement filled the room, your pulse began to echo louder than any noise they created. You could see the unity in their faces, not the kind that comes from love but the kind that comes from preparing to strike together, each one waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the secret they believed could break you. Your spirit sensed a shift, a slow darkening in their eyes, like shadows gathering for a purpose you had not been warned about. They thought you were too distracted to notice the glances they exchanged, the hidden signals, the slight nods that passed like a silent language of betrayal across the room. You could feel the truth pulsing in the air, rising like a silent tide preparing to swallow everything you had fought so long to build, and their laughter became sharper, almost metallic. The light in the room began to dim, not because of anything physical, but because realization itself started drawing the warmth out of the moment. The whispers grew louder in your memory while their voices softened in the present, blending into a cruel harmony designed to remind you that they believed they knew everything about you. They believed your story was theirs to expose, your identity theirs to shatter, your soul theirs to define, but there was a deeper truth inside you they never imagined you carried. Something ancient, something powerful, something beyond their limited understanding was beginning to rise, awakening at the very moment they prepared to strike. Type 333 blessing to receive the first blessing. Their eyes sharpened as they stepped closer, each one fueled by an excitement you had never seen in your family before, and for a moment, it felt as if the walls themselves leaned in to listen. The temperature around you shifted, dropping lower, then rising again, as though the environment couldn't decide whether to freeze you or prepare you for fire. You stood still, not out of fear, but because something bigger in you told you this moment was not the end they believed it was. Their voices overlapped, forming a single rhythm of accusation disguised as humor, a rhythm designed to corner you in front of everyone who had doubted you before. Your heartbeat transformed into a drum announcing the arrival of a destiny that had been delayed but never denied, and every memory of pain you had survived in the past began to awaken behind your eyes. You could hear the echo of your own breath revealing how close the breaking point was, yet you remained steady because something inside you refused to bend. The moment their laughter stopped, the silence hit with the force of a storm, as if the world itself paused to witness what they believed would destroy your spirit forever. Their expressions grew darker, more deliberate, more determined, and with every passing second, they prepared themselves to deliver the final blow. They thought they had reached the height of their power over you, unaware that your true identity was nothing they could ever expose, because it was something they could never comprehend. The first family member stepped forward, acting as though the spotlight belonged to them, and the others followed like an unspoken army ready to perform a revelation they believed would bring your downfall. Yet behind their excitement, something trembled, a faint, invisible warning that the truth they thought they possessed was incomplete, twisted, and destined to reverse upon them. You felt the ground settle beneath you, not to trap you, but to anchor you for what was about to unfold in front of every watching eye. Their intention spread through the room like a cold wind slipping under locked doors, the kind that carries the smell of betrayal and the weight of years of suppressed envy. The night no longer belonged to them, even though they believed they controlled it, because your true self was something divine, unbreakable, and chosen beyond their comprehension. Yet they still prepared themselves as though they were unveiling the deepest secret of your life when in reality, they were awakening your greatest transformation. The second family member finally spoke, their words dripping with the confidence of someone who believed they had uncovered your entire truth, yet their voice trembled ever so slightly. That tremble revealed everything: fear, uncertainty, and the faint awareness that they were about to step into a destiny they could not control. Their attempt to expose you was rooted in old wounds, old envy, and old lies that had lived too long in the corners of their hearts. The third family member joined in, forcing their voice into a tone of victory, as though they had been waiting for this exact moment for years. Each syllable they spoke carried the bitterness of all the times they believed you had risen higher than you deserved, and all the times they felt invisible in your light. Their attempt to expose you was not about truth at all, but about reclaiming a power they never truly possessed. Type 444 blessing to receive the next blessing. As they spoke, the room shifted again, not physically, but spiritually, as though the energy within you expanded outward, pressing against every shadow, every intention, every whispered lie. Their laughter began to crack, breaking apart into fragments of discomfort as they felt something rising in you that their accusations could not touch. The more they tried to expose you, the more their confidence faded, replaced by a silent confusion they could not explain. Your presence grew heavier, stronger, almost luminous, but not with a visible glow, more like an energy that filled the space with undeniable authority. They began to sense that the truth they believed they held over you was powerless in the face of what you were becoming. You stood taller without moving, louder without speaking, and more unstoppable without lifting a single finger. Their attempts felt weaker with every passing second, as though the power they thought they held over your identity evaporated into the air before it ever reached its intended mark. They carried old stories, twisted memories, and invented projections, but none of it aligned with the true essence that lived inside you. Your silence confused them because they expected you to tremble, or break, or collapse, but instead, you showed a stillness they were unprepared to confront. The truth they feared was not the one they tried to expose, but the one they never realized. You were chosen, formed from something untouchable, awakened by a power deeper than anything they could speak into existence. Their energy faltered as they felt the shift, a change so heavy that their laughter finally collapsed into silence. The room felt charged, like the sky before a storm that would not simply arrive but transform the entire landscape. Slowly, they backed away from the center, unsure of whether to step toward you or retreat into the shadows they once believed protected them. Their confidence drained from their faces, replaced by a discomfort they could not hide, for they had walked into a moment that did not belong to them. This was your moment, your rising, your awakening, your transformation, and nothing they said or believed could interfere with what destiny had already written over your life. Their unity fell apart, each one stepping away from the other, no longer laughing, no longer sure, no longer powerful. The truth they expected to weaponize had turned into a mirror reflecting their own hidden fears, insecurities, and silent regrets. You remained rooted, steady, calm, like a force that had been waiting for this moment to reveal that nothing they carried could tear down the identity you were born with. Your strength rose like a tide that could not be undone, and every attempt they made dissolved before it could harm you. They watched in disbelief as their narrative lost its power, as their intentions unraveled, and as the truth they tried to expose became irrelevant. You did not need to speak, because your presence alone spoke louder than any accusation they prepared. The night continued, but the energy shifted completely, transforming the atmosphere into something sacred, powerful, and beyond the reach of any family member who attempted to stand against you. You breathed steadily, and that breath alone carried a message they could not ignore, a message of authority, destiny, and unbreakable spirit. Your identity stood untouchable, untouched, unburned, and unshaken, rising above every attempt to bring it down. Type 555 blessing to receive the final blessing. The silence thickened as each family member stepped back into the corners of their own discomfort, trying to understand how the moment they planned so confidently had turned into a stage they no longer controlled. You stood unmoved, your presence stretching further than their intentions, rising like an unseen force that rearranged the atmosphere around every person in the room. Their earlier laughter felt like a distant echo, weak and forgotten, unable to compete with the strength that now radiated from your identity. The shift inside you became unmistakable, a deep awakening that filled your chest with a power you had carried since birth yet rarely unleashed in its full intensity. Your silence was no longer silence, but a statement carved into the room with a weight none of them could push against. Everything about you began to expand, the energy, the authority, the clarity, and they watched helplessly as their confidence crumbled piece by piece. Their eyes avoided yours now, not to protect themselves from guilt, but because looking directly at you meant confronting a truth that terrified them more than the secrets they tried to expose. They had never expected you to stand as tall as you were now, never expected your spirit to carry such strength, never expected the moment to turn against them so sharply. The very air around you felt alive, as if the space itself recognized the power that their betrayal had awakened. One by one, they shifted their stance, their expressions tightening with confusion, and the unity they once shared dissolved into fragments of isolated fear. Their hearts raced, not because they feared you physically, but because something inside them recognized a force they could not overpower or ridicule. They had touched something sacred in you without understanding its depth, and the consequences of their decision began to unfold right before their eyes. The weight of all their hidden intentions lingered between you, thick and unmoving, revealing every silent jealousy they carried behind their smiles. They had disguised their envy as concern, their resentment as humor, their bitterness as family tradition, but the truth now hovered openly in the room without a single word needing to be spoken. Their own hearts exposed them more deeply than their accusations ever could have exposed you. Your spirit rose higher with every breath, fueled not by anger, but by the undeniable recognition of your purpose, your path, and your unshakable core. Every wound you once carried felt like it had sealed itself shut, transforming into strength that pushed beyond the edges of what they believed you were capable of. The light within you did not flash or spark, it expanded quietly, steadily, with a force too profound to be ignored. Their gazes flickered nervously between one another, each hoping someone else would speak, someone else would restore the moment, someone else would reclaim the control they had just lost. But none of them could step forward, because the truth had already shifted into your hands, replacing every lie they tried to place at your feet. The tension pressed against their chests as they realized they had underestimated the power of your destiny. The walls seemed to draw closer around them, amplifying the embarrassment rising in their faces, and they felt exposed in ways they never intended for themselves. They began to feel the weight of their own shadows, the heaviness of their own choices, the sting of their own actions. The plan they used to laugh about in whispers now felt childish, reckless, and dangerously foolish. You did not need to move to assert your presence. The strength flowing from you filled the entire room, shifting the balance entirely. Every past betrayal they believed had weakened you now transformed into fuel that elevated you higher than they expected. Their attempts to break you had unknowingly triggered your next level, a rise none of them had prepared themselves to witness. Breathing suddenly became harder for them, not because the air changed, but because shame pressed tightly against their ribs. They felt smaller, quieter, incomplete, as though the truth within you cast a shadow too large for them to escape. Their earlier confidence now felt like a distant memory flickering in the dark corners of their own regret. One family member placed a hand against the wall, steadying themselves as the energy in the room continued to rise around you, thick and powerful. They had expected tears, weakness, collapse, but instead they were met with a rising force that pushed back against every intention they carried. Your identity cracked through the floor of their assumptions, expanding in ways they never imagined. Nothing about you trembled anymore. Nothing about you wavered. Nothing about you bent to the weight of their attempts. They saw a version of you they had never allowed themselves to acknowledge, a version that stood above their expectations, above their judgments, above every shadow they tried to cast on your path. Their lips tightened with the realization that the story they tried to control had rewritten itself in your favor. The atmosphere felt charged, as though destiny itself had stepped into the room to stand beside you. The second wave of silence hit harder than the first, sinking into their skin like a truth they could not outrun. Every hidden intention, every whispered insult, every attempt to undermine you clung to them with a weight they could no longer ignore. The emotional shift in the room was undeniable, pressing their spirits into corners they wished they could escape. When they looked at you now, they saw someone untouchable, someone transformed, someone they could no longer mold into the version they preferred. They sensed a rising energy surrounding you, forming a quiet shield that made every one of their accusations feel small and meaningless. Their pride began to sink beneath their ribs, replaced by a discomfort they could not disguise. A strange heaviness settled over the group, a heaviness born from confrontation with the truth of who you truly were. Not their interpretations, not their projections, not their assumptions, but the real essence, powerful and awakened. Something inside them knew that this moment had changed everything permanently. The laughter they shared earlier became an embarrassing memory, something they wished they could erase but couldn't. They felt foolish for celebrating your downfall before it ever existed, believing they held the final word in your story. Now, they felt the rising reality that your path was never theirs to define. Your strength was not loud, not aggressive, not destructive. It was calm, steady, serene, yet impossible to ignore, a kind of strength rooted in destiny rather than ego. That realization shook them more deeply than any defense you could have offered. Their shadows recoiled as your presence expanded, pushing their negativity back into the corners where it belonged. The light inside you continued to grow, stretching into every inch of the room until their false narratives had no place left to cling. What they tried to use against you turned into the very thing that elevated you. Their stance softened, their shoulders slumped, their expressions dimmed with the weight of understanding they had tried so hard to avoid. Every layer of pretense peeled away from them as the truth of your identity stood firm before them. Their attempts to break you had failed long before they ever tried. The night did not belong to them anymore. The moment did not belong to them anymore. The story did not belong to them anymore. It belonged to you, completely, undeniably, irrevocably. And nothing they did could take it back. The energy in the room shifted into something almost tangible, a force that wrapped around you with steady certainty, while your family stood in the fading light of their own intentions. The truth they tried to weaponize lost all its sharpness, dissolving before it ever reached your spirit, leaving only their discomfort exposed. Their shoulders lowered under the weight of realization, as though the moment itself forced them to confront everything they had ignored in you. Your presence created a boundary they could not cross, an unseen line drawn by destiny rather than emotion, holding them back from causing further harm. The air moved differently around you, filled with quiet authority that made their earlier actions feel small and unnecessary. Their expressions shifted from defiance to uncertainty, each one slowly understanding that they had overstepped a line they never should have touched. Something deep within you awakened further, rising with the slow, deliberate strength of a force that had waited patiently for the right moment to reveal itself. Their attempts to expose you only opened a doorway to a deeper part of your identity, a part untouched by their judgment or their narratives. They now stood in the presence of someone far greater than the version of you they had tried to shape. Their fear did not come from danger, but from truth, the kind that exposes every hidden motive without a single word being spoken. They felt the shift in your energy as clearly as a hand pressed against their chest, reminding them that your spirit held a depth they never bothered to recognize. That depth now rose before them, unmistakable and impossible to deny. The stillness around you deepened, drawing their attention inward as the weight of their actions settled more heavily on their spirits. Each one began to feel the uncomfortable realization that they had misjudged you, underestimated you, and tried to confine you to a story that never belonged to you. Their guilt clung to them like heavy fabric, reminding them that the moment had slipped out of their control the moment you stood firm. Your silence carried more truth than their accusations ever could, revealing everything they had chosen not to see in you. This silence was not empty but filled with clarity and strength, exposing their illusions one by one. The room felt brighter around you, not by light, but by presence, as though the space finally understood who held the true authority. They shifted uncomfortably, feeling the weight of their own shadows stretching behind them as the truth illuminated every corner of their intentions. Their unity broke completely, leaving each member standing alone in the reality of what they had attempted. The strength they once believed they held slipped through their fingers like dust, leaving only the evidence of their own insecurities. Your spirit remained steady, glowing with a quiet confidence that made their earlier laughter feel distant and misplaced. The calmness in your posture struck them more deeply than any anger ever could, revealing the depth of your self-awareness. They realized too late that they had stepped into a moment designed for your rise, not your fall. The heaviness of the room pressed closer against their mistake, making each of them conscious of how far they had gone without considering the consequences. Their voices failed them now, trapped behind a tightness in their throats as they absorbed the undeniable truth of who you had become. Every second stretched, forcing them to confront everything they failed to acknowledge in you. Light seemed to gather around your presence in a way none of them could ignore, forming a silent barrier that reminded them of your untouchable spirit. They realized that the identity they tried to tear down could not be broken, because it was not built from their approval in the first place. Everything about you now radiated strength that grew from within, far beyond their assumptions. Their shadows fell away from you, unable to cling to a destiny that refused to bend under any pressure they applied. Your path stretched forward, clear and unobstructed, as though the moment itself swept away every lie they carried. They stood frozen, watching the revelation of your true nature unfold in a way they could not deny. A quiet realization crossed their faces as they understood they were not confronting the person they thought they knew, but a force sculpted by endurance, shaped by purpose, and lifted by something far greater. Their breath grew heavy, reflecting the weight of the truth settling over them. The moment felt transformative, as though destiny had chosen this exact night to reveal your true elevation. Nothing about you dimmed under their gaze. Nothing about you shrank or faltered. Nothing about you surrendered to their intentions. Instead, you rose higher, supported by every challenge you had overcome, every wound you had healed, and every moment you refused to let break you. That rise formed a glow around you that made their accusations look meaningless and outdated. Their spirits shook as they realized they had awakened a power within you that they never understood. One by one, their eyes met yours with a fragile mixture of regret and disbelief, silently acknowledging that they had been wrong in ways they could never take back. The room echoed with the weight of their remorse, even though none of them dared to speak it aloud. Their earlier confidence collapsed under the truth they saw standing in front of them. The night deepened, and the shadows around you softened as though even the darkness recognized your growing strength. Your spirit remained grounded, unaffected by the chaos they tried to create, forming a presence that overshadowed every attempt to diminish you. They finally understood that your identity had always been bigger than their limited vision. Their defeat did not come from your anger or retaliation. It came from your unshakable peace. A peace strong enough to dismantle every illusion they built. Your calmness revealed their intentions more clearly than any confrontation ever could, and the silence in the room became a mirror reflecting their choices. They felt exposed by their own actions, not by anything you did, and that realization settled over them like a cold wind. The moment they believed would weaken you became the moment that revealed their own weakness. You remained centered, grounded in the inner knowing that your path had never depended on their approval or acceptance. Every breath you took carried strength that grew deeper with each passing second, filling the room with an undeniable sense of authority. They watched helplessly as the truth reshaped the entire atmosphere around you. Your identity stood before them now, firm and luminous, carved from resilience, shaped by endurance, and protected by a destiny beyond their comprehension. They felt the distance between who they thought you were and who you truly had become stretching wider, separating their illusions from your reality. The truth of your strength rose like a tide, unstoppable and undeniable. Their hearts tightened as they absorbed everything they had never taken the time to understand about you. They realized you had never been who they assumed, never been the one they tried to define, never been the target they believed you were. You were something greater, something stronger, something sacred in ways they never acknowledged. The moment stood still as they confronted the truth they could no longer avoid. Your transformation continued in silence, steady and unstoppable. Nothing they did could change what was unfolding now. The night settled gently around you, wrapping your spirit in a quiet assurance that no attempt to expose you could ever overshadow your purpose. Their actions only made your strength shine brighter, illuminating everything they tried to dim. You stood at the center of the room like a living declaration of destiny's protection. Your family no longer held power over your identity. Your identity no longer fit the small frame they tried to force you into. Your rise no longer depended on anyone but you.